I guess I will call this meeting to order. The first thing on the agenda was the minutes from last meeting. Did everybody have a chance to look at them? Any corrections, and do we want to approve them?
I move approval of minutes from the last meeting.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Then the only other thing, and I mentioned this before, Janet, you got in the room, but I did mention a lot of us have the hard stop at 5. So we will have to respect that time. But I'll turn it over to you. We only have one thing on the agenda.
Sure, and we see it as 2 parts. We want to share the data with you that we've collected over the last several weeks so you can see that and look at that. And then just grab some direction from you all about how you'd like us to present it tomorrow night. We have Black Voices Project tonight, and so depending on how many folks are there, our responses are going to be just probably under 800. So only about 750,
760, yeah, right in there.
760 right now that have participated either just online or through one of the feedback sessions. So, Chris, you want to go ahead and hand those out. So this is the overall.
Fingers still gonna work. Sorry.
This is the overall data set, just looking at all the different responses. And we don't have that in on here, but it's 760. And so it gives you an idea of kind of how the data fell out. Give you a chance to look at that real quick and start talking.
And Chase, is this 760 the first round group, or the second round small breakout groups, or a combination of both groups?
It's a combination
Okay.
of both, yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, say reactions, any surprises or kind of initial takeaways?
Well, just to understand, so each one of these areas is a number of votes or preferences made by individual participants, right?
Yes.
And each participant selected six
Correct.
areas, okay?
They may not have necessarily picked 6, they just couldn't pick more than
They couldn't
6.
pick more than 6, okay.
I thought the additional classroom space was interesting, being so high up on the list.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is it just people worried about, I know this is longer term, obviously, but are people worried about class sizes now and
I think
social distancing? And I just didn't know if that was top of mind for people as they're filling this out.
Yeah, I think the top 2 are honestly COVID influenced. I think
Yeah.
SEL would be
Yeah, I
in the top
agree.
anyways, but I think it's especially relevant, with COVID.
Yeah.
And so those 2, I think, are heavily influenced by the climate group currently.
Yeah.
well, and you also, the fact that health and safety's on there.
Yeah,
is-
that made the top 5.
That made
yeah.
it,
Yeah,
so it's
it's
surprising.
definitely
I wouldn't have thought
influenced
that would have
by-
been in there.
You know what I did hear? So I went to all the public 2.0 meetings, and around additional classroom space, there was a really interesting discussion at one point. I don't know if you all led it or if somebody from the community brought it up, but it was saying, if you think social emotional learning is really important, then how that interacts with classroom space is really important. Like City High has the nest, but if you don't have room for a nest program, and you think the nest is important, but there's no classroom space for it, guess what? You're not going to get it. So if your idea is there are new things that we want to do in the buildings, we have to make sure that we have the space to do them. And I think, and I may have heard that in a couple of sessions, and so I think that was part of the thinking behind classrooms. So it's not just smaller classrooms, it's
More
flexibility to do interesting
Yeah.
programming in the schools, but we need the space to do that. But and let me know if,
No, I think that's
I'm
accurate. The other
misinterpreting
thing,
that.
I think, with a similar connection you're making with the SEL stuff, Lisa, is you know, what are the things that help improve SEL? I think that's the things we need to think about. So you see some of the other wraparound things that we're more accustomed to, maybe lower in the list, but things like performance music, athletics, extracurriculars really in general, we know have a positive impact on a student's social emotional well-being, right? And so I think when we look at that one about what that means to us, you know, what are those different components that help improve the SEL of our students and staff are going to be important considerations. So that's the other one. And I heard that from a lot of people too in listening when they report out was, well, it was hard to pick one of these because it really almost fits under a larger concept to me, right? So.
And so I just got this data this afternoon. Chris and I just did it after our staff one. And then I do at some point want us to go through and show you the results on the screen of each one of the different sessions, so you can kind of look and see how these overall 6 kind of, if they were kind of how they were reflected. But while these might not have been my 6, if you think back 6 months ago when Dwayne put together kind of like his foreshadowing of different projects, I think to the point that Matt was just making, as we think of the projects that we want to do, that we know we need to do, everything from just systems upgrades to new schools, these categories aren't bad in terms of how we fit things underneath them, right? Like had something like middle schools or playgrounds been in the top 6, it's really hard to fit specific projects under something that is that finite. And so these categories at the top, while I am a bit surprised something like health and safety is up there, they provide us a lot of ability to interpret what that means and being able to kind of say, hey, look, we're listening to the public. You want additional classrooms? Well, we're building 3 new schools, right? So there is some good in the way some of these follow.
Yeah, and I think at least in some of the groups too that I was in, health and safety was interpreted as including mental health. And so it went hand in hand with the social emotional learning. And it went in, and that kind of went in hand with the, you know, the band, orchestra, extracurricular, like all of the things that make our kids rounded, happy kids.
Yeah. Which really fits under your whole child guiding principle too,
Right.
in a way, right? I mean, those nest nice under there too.
So,
Go ahead, Charlie.
looking at the career and technical education and learning pathways, college career life, do you think those 2 are very similar in the minds of a lot of people? I'm thinking of the equity discussion we had the other night with the Decile and Lulu, and I think they were saying that they weren't quite sure if there was a lot of difference in those two goals. So,
Well, I think my initial reaction to that one, Trey, would be it depends who you ask. Like, I think that
yeah,
for our kids, sometimes they can see that link closer together than maybe what
yeah,
some traditional folks in the community would think, that either you're college going or you're career
Right.
tech ed focused, right? And that those
That's not
mean
what-
2 different things.
That's
And
not what either
Yeah,
either
and
of them were saying.
I think really that one, again, that's under your path, that multiple pathways one nice in a way, because we want to provide as many ramps as we can for kids, right? That they are able to pursue and that they know of the opportunities that are there. So
Right.
I was pleased to see that one get the response it did, because I think that is a
Well,
necessary
yeah, I
piece for us.
understand that. Any notion about how many students are included here?
Oh, no, that would be a tough one.
It is hard to figure out, I'm sure.
It is, because those open sessions, a lot of people didn't even have their cameras on, let alone to know who that was participating.
Okay, maybe I should give that up then.
Okay, so
So is middle schools being lower down, is that going to be an ongoing issue with us and actually creating middle schools?
I mean, I think.
Well, I mean-
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the concept of middle schools, like Chase said, that would have been a tough one in a finite sense to say how does it then fit a goal or where does it belong. But I think middle schools fit under potentially some of your other goals. It would fit under supporting the whole child. It could fit under supporting some of our equity work. It could fit under multiple pathways for students. It depends what you want to accomplish. Like, we'd have to articulate the goals we want to accomplish by a middle school model. Like, just to
Yeah.
build middle schools For space, I think we'd have a hard time potentially on that one, but if you could connect it to space and
Right.
learning goals, then I think it makes a lot of sense that this would help us achieve other goals we have for our kids.
And similar to that, like I look at the break between number 6 and number 7, there's about 40 votes. But then there's, the next 7 are all within 40 votes. And so it's really that same point. I mean, I think
Yeah.
you look at the outdoor learning spaces, that's important obviously to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You can incorporate those under health and safety or
Social emotional.
social emotional, right? And so as we develop those projects, I think that you have that double of saying, look, not only is an outdoor space good for social emotional, we also know it's responsive. Well, not the top 6, but there was a large percentage of people that did pick that. And so we can go back and make those connections to other things along the way.
And classroom space.
In classroom space, right? And I mean, and Janet, you asked it right at the top, but I mean, I think that, I don't think we heard a lot about class size and some of the public discussions, like, well, you have nothing to hear about class size. So like, well, we do, it's just, class size isn't how you build facilities, and so these are the things that would talk to that. And there are a number of people that made comments about class size, I think, almost in every single one of the sessions, so it's not, that's not surprising when it's up there.
Mainly elementary class sizes, was that the discussion, or?
I don't know if I could say it was just elementary. I mean, I do think oftentimes that's where we hear some more about class size. Secondary, sometimes they're more willing to deal with it, but I think it's relevant for all levels in the year we just had around class size and looking at that. I mean, they had smaller class sizes last year because of the potential enrollment into online, but that wasn't universally true, just based on how we had to split staff. We did try to do some things that you'll see tomorrow night with class size relief, but it's just inextricably linked to additional classroom space, because even as we had the FTE to potentially provide in the next 2 years, we ended up not having the classrooms to split sections out, so we had to come back with academic support teachers to try to do more pull out or divide sections when we could to do instructional practice, so you gotta have the space, they're just both linked together.
So, Kristen, can you connect, and, I mean, this is both as we kind of work through this, but then also with an eye for tomorrow about what you want us to present. So, I mean, we have something like this for every single one of the sessions, and so obviously I think it's good for the committee to see how they shook out, but then it's a matter of, okay, how and what do we want to present to the entire board tomorrow night?
If you're gonna present this data for each of those sessions tomorrow night, I wanna call for a 15-minute recess so I can figure it out.
Oops.
Okay, Kristen, so you're going to tell us which session is which as we pull them up.
Do you have a preference for where to begin on that?
No?
Okay. Let's see, this makes it with my smaller screen. Give me just a second to minimize things here so I can read the full name. Do we want to go backwards? Do you want to start with our staff session today?
Sure.
I'll go one more lower because I can't read. All right.
The other interesting thing we found as Kristen pulls this up. Oh, there it is. Okay, so for our staff today, top 6, career in tech, followed by technology, social emotional, STEAM and STEM, learning pathways, and additional classroom space. That's the top 6. So, and their 7th is health and safety. So even though a small group, only about 20 people, 5 of their 6 are in the top. 5 of their 6 are in the top 6 overall, which I'm actually surprised at.
Let's jump back.
So, one of the things I was gonna say is what we found, and we don't know why, and it happened almost in every group, including today, and I actually pushed them a little bit, is people would log on and they would listen, but then only about a half or 2/3 of the people that were there would actually submit a response.
Yeah.
Even though it's anonymous.
Oh, wow,
Yeah, and you're
Makes
like,
sense,
it's
though.
like, why wouldn't you submit that? So-
I heard some feedback from parents who did that exact thing, and it was because they were they didn't want to make a mistake, and they didn't want to misinterpret any of the box and what the boxes meant, and they just didn't have enough quite enough time with the descriptions, you know, because there's that. And so they kind of were like, oh, I don't want to screw this up, so I'm not going to participate because I don't feel, which I thought was really silly, and I would always say, no, just
Yeah.
please participate. But I think that was a little bit of it, a little fear of.
And there may have been a little bit of people who had completed the public link but wanted to sit on a session but didn't, like I think Charlie, you mentioned that you didn't want to take it again because you had already done it through the public link. So there could have been a little bit of that
I
duplication.
thought Charlie said he'd taken it 3 times.
I think that was Lisa maybe. I
That'll look good on my record.
That is interesting though, if people are apprehensive to submit their
Right.
own thoughts.
Well,
I feel like if it had just been the group activity, you asked a group one to do it.
Yeah.
I wonder what that response rate would look like for
And-
individuals instead of asking the individuals to go first.
And it was interesting because that's when it came up in the group. Was it during those small breakout rooms? And they would say, oh, I didn't know what this meant, or I wasn't comfortable. And then in the group, they would work through it and they'd have a discussion about, well, let's go read the definition together. And we would. And then they'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah,
They'd
let's
pick
pick
one and
that.
somebody tell them that was a bad idea, right?
Yeah.
So this
So
is the equity committee's
Okay.
individual rankings.
And we had a small turnout, but it was a great conversation.
It was good
You
conversation.
talked about classroom space. I think Deja actually was talking about classroom space at the secondary level, not at the elementary, because I asked her about,
Yep.
are you talking about more classrooms or larger classrooms? And she said, oh, no, I don't want them larger, because I already have enough kids packed into them. And so she meant, and so I think that she was talking about secondary too, but. So accessibility, climate action, learning pathways, social emotional learning, performance music, and then a whole bunch tied for their sixth slot. That's our smaller group.
All right, just takes me a second to navigate through these. We can look at our admin session. Maybe.
Broke it.
Deleted it all.
I did, broke it. Let's see if it's gonna pop up. We might have to come back to this one. Do you wanna go into the public sessions as
Yeah,
well?
let's do those.
Okay.
Is there a separate teacher session?
That was the one we
The
did
staff
today.
one that we did today, and they're 5 to 6. They're on it.
So, here's just one of our public sessions. I think I truly am breaking Qualtrics right now. It's not wanting to work very well for me.
Your expectations are too high.
Yes.
Quit demanding something.
So this was the
It's
last,
very aligned.
yeah,
Yep.
learning pathways, career tech, additional classroom space, health and safety, emotional learning, and work-based learning. There's another one that I think overlaps a lot with some of the-
Right.
So, as we go through these, are you starting to think how we might want to do this? I mean, if we do it, we'll do it all in PDF, so we won't bring it up,
Just
but.
ask the board members if they want to look at the individual ones.
Well, I'll say what I'm interested in is a combination based on kind of affinity groups. So like all of the community sessions into one, combined into one graphic. And then,
Okay.
did you do 2 staff sessions?
Yeah, we do the staff and an admin, so you could combine
So combining those into one, and then the affinity groups, like the equity committee, BB, whoever else has combining that so that, and that's just me, but seeing those kind of 3 diverse groups of perspectives on the school, side by side,
Well, I was thinking about it through that lens too, as you guys were pulling up these different ones. Because, of course, it's gonna be somewhat overall aligned to this, but to see that those different groups you're just talking about are also aligned, that they didn't just get end out by the volume of the community, would be, I think, an important point to show, right? That the admin, the teachers, equity committee, these different groups still align to even this large end of mostly the community responses.
yeah. And then this one, of course, is the overall one, but.
Yeah. Yeah, I can certainly pull those groups together, no problem, and just have a similar graphic for each.
Yeah, I just think though, if we had like all 6 individual community sessions,
It's a little much.
that's too
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
too deep of a dive into.
It's almost if you had those aggregated and then showed the other different specialized groups.
Mhm.
Yep. We can easily do that.
So can you put those up before the meetings?
I should be able to pull those, so once we get the data from tonight's meeting, I should be able to do that first thing tomorrow and pull those numbers together. The public link, the link that's been open, would you like that merged into to the community sessions, those 5 or 6 community sessions, or keep that as a separate data set?
I kind of want to, personally, I kind of want to see it separately because those are responses that have zero face-to-face context to them.
Right.
I mean, admittedly, it's a large group, so I have, my notion is it's going to be the 6 or close to it that are at the top, but it'd still be interesting to see it.
Yeah, I
broken
think
by
we had
some.
about 620 responses to that public link.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
separate,
think-
a
I
separate
think so,
piece?
yeah.
Let's have that separate.
Okay.
And anybody could have filled that out.
Right.
Do we limit how many times they can fill it out also? I mean, could somebody go fill it out 10 times?
I think I turned on the prevent ballot box
Okay.
stuffing, so,
So
I mean,
have
they
to
could if
clear
they
their
really
cache.
wanted
Public
to.
link you did, but if they
Yeah.
participate in the groups, they
Yeah.
participate in more than once.
Right. Although I shut it down right away. So as soon as we'd get done with the individual session and a community engagement session, I would turn it off right away. So that when they moved on to the group part of it, they wouldn't get the links confused, so.
Okay.
So we can present all those. What else for tomorrow evening? Or what are we, because tomorrow, because we've been focused on some other things. Tomorrow night we're presenting the ballot language.
Mm-hmm.
The ballot language tomorrow night. We're gonna present this, and then we said we would go back and obviously do the rest of that document, and then we'd use like the next month to start kind of giving some example projects. Although I think we wanna talk to I don't wanna get in front of you.
No, it's
We wanna
okay. I
talk
think
this
that,
strategy.
yeah, I'll just say,
Yeah.
I mean, so part of this, and if you, this kind of anchors back to some of the conversations we were having early on this too, is like, what's the right balance to meet the community's expectations around what level of detail we share? Also with balancing this against, it's not a general obligation bond where they're voting on actual specific language, because we don't inadvertently want to paint ourselves into a very specific corner like we've painted these projects, right? Like there could still be work to do or adjustments we want to leave ourselves, but we also want to balance that with being very transparent about our intentions and what we'd like to do. So, and I'm kind of saying that from the theme that, you know, for a Pepple and Save vote in a lot of communities, we've already blown it out of the water for how much engagement you would do around this type of work, right? For just extending 2 levies that we already have. So you don't want to go too far that then it's almost like now they're voting up your projects up or down, right? Like, did you make the right decisions? Like, really, we should be talking about, is this funding stream appropriate for the district? And then you guys as decision makers should be making informed decisions from your constituents about how to spend those dollars, right? With our guidance and recommendations. So I'm just saying that with, okay, what's that, to kind of foreshadow, what's that next round of engagement going to look like and how specific do you guys want to be? Because I do think there is a point to which you could start to almost overdo, you know, how specific you're getting or how much you're talking about in specifics around when those projects are going to happen and what it's going to be. But you are trying to balance that with, you do want them to support the end goal. And the last thing I'll say about it that I've told our team is we're also already normed to that, right? That's what they expect from the first process. So we're also working with that, and we need to acknowledge that and honor that too, that if that's what we did in the first process, they're looking for probably something similar here, even though it is different. So I'm not saying there's a perfect solution, I just think those are things to consider that on both sides of it. The expectation's one place, but how much do you reasonably want to do?
So how is the planning process going to unfold in terms of addressing these top 6 in what the FMP 2.0, I mean, how's that? I mean, you've got a list, we've seen a list of proposed projects out there, but I'm just, because I think that's what the community got used to seeing with
Right.
1.0 was like here's all the building projects and what's going to happen in each building, whether you have to be that specific or not, but there needs to be a plan, and each one of the things on the plan needs to align
Yep.
to these top 6, and the principles from Portrait of a Grad, and the business case has to be really strong and aligned to what the community's told us. So I
Right.
think going through the planning and ideation, you know, version 1, here's what it's looking like, and sort of how the dollars are being distributed across the 6, and, you know, and then maybe having a community engagement or two, is this fitting, but not voting on every specific project, but I think there probably does need to be, once you have a plan, some opportunity for community members to weigh in.
Right.
So I think we would go back to even that draft document that we kind of floated around some of the projects back in January.
How do they align?
And see how they
Yeah.
align. That's why when I made that statement a few minutes ago about these are terrible, not that anyone would be terrible, these are good because we can work with them and we have that ability to
Yeah.
adapt those a little bit.
Yeah.
There isn't something like middle schools where.
Yeah, or magnet schools, that
Or
would have
magnet
been a
school,
big
right?
deal too, right,
It'd be
yeah.
really hard to put very much variety
Yeah.
under there, but the way these are, I think we go back to that list.
And start mapping and then seeing if there are
Yeah.
gaps.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, we are gonna have to be able to articulate some of the things we're doing with these funds. If we wanna borrow against these funds and we wanna do it, we are gonna have to articulate out what a plan is. I think what I'm trying to share a little bit is, we also wanna give ourselves some room that we do have the ability to change or adjust if necessary. So that first, piece Dwayne shared with us kinda had, I think it was it ABC, how we talked about it?
Yeah.
And some of the stuff on the back end maybe took some refinement, because some of these things you guys might want some more time to talk about and decide if we're gonna commit to, right? I mean, and some of them, we better recognize to important stakeholder groups that this is something we're serious about and that we're gonna do, I keep talking about Hills Elementary sometimes in a vacuum, like that's one that we probably just need to have on the list, that we probably need to say out front, that project's gonna get done, right? But there's other ones around when you're talking about potentially athletic upgrades or middle schools, if those are gonna be serious ones, those are probably things we're gonna have to continue to engage around, or give them a piece and say, this is when the conversation for this school's gonna happen, this is when the conversation for this school's gonna happen about how you do that, so.
Oh, see, I thought you were gonna go a little bit differently there, because there's things like athletic facilities that are in the bottom third on this list, but we just know from our experience, those are gonna create as many political issues for you as anything else that's above it. And so how do we figure out how to fit that into something that's a category? Because we just know, like, we know where the community is on that. All of a sudden, if we don't do any of the things we proposed at City High or West High, that's gonna create problems for Matt.
Yeah,
Just
And for us.
Yeah, for Matt.
well, I think you're right, and that was probably a bad example to use, I had that one underlined on my page, but
No, I think
I
it's a
think
good
even
example.
so, like, I guess that's why I kind of changed course in the middle. I was talking about a timeline, right? Like, even if
Yeah.
you knew, hey, we're gonna go engage the City High community during this phase of the project about what athletic upgrades we're gonna do here, then we're gonna move to West High and Liberty, whatever that order would be, but you are gonna have to say some of those things, and we are gonna have to articulate an element of plan. Again, I would just say, you wanna give yourself some space to either vet out some of these ideas a little further, or to be able to make some adjustments if necessary. We can't have that whole, well, not can't, I'm not sure we wanna have the whole plan and every dollar accounted for by the time we get to November.
I agree.
And I think you're saying the same thing.
No, and to me, like, sticking with athletic facilities, right? There's Old Hoover and there are no tennis courts on City. And so what's gonna happen with tennis at City is a really big deal. But it's such a micro, I mean, we're talking, right, about this big, long-term F&P next 10 years, that the tennis courts, just because athletic facilities are near the bottom, doesn't mean we're not gonna build the tennis courts. But
Right.
the direction I take from this is, we're not gonna have the best and brightest athletic facilities in the state. Like, the community has not signaled that we want to dump all of this money into erecting premier athletic facilities in our schools. And so that's not, but that doesn't mean that we're not gonna go and do these commitments, like tennis courts. It's just a small part, but it's not part of the whole overall picture. And if that's correct, I think that'll be important messaging to do, so that those interests, when they see athletic fields are at the bottom, they don't get concerned and say, whoa, we thought we were getting XYZ, or we need new turf, like the life cycle of the turf on the soccer field is shot. Does this mean you're not gonna, we're gonna start playing in mud? No, it just means that it's not one of the driving priorities that everything is gonna touch, but we're still doing these.
Yeah, I think it's
Maintenance.
just around managing expectations,
Yeah.
and I think that's the conversation around it, is how do you meet their expectations, but also manage those expectations as you get towards November. And I don't know, I would just keep repeating myself. Like I said, I think we've blown it out of the water with what you would typically do around this type of a vote for November, but there's a reason we had to do that, right? Because of what we're just coming off of and what they were normed to and what they deserve, you know, when we're expending this much dollars into our facilities, so.
So from our timeline, we put a work session on the 24th of this month, where we could have maybe brought kind of that, like an idea of how that would line out for the board to kind of talk about in further detail before we went out to the community. I think we did the 24th, looking at the calendar, because the first board meeting in September isn't actually till the 14th, because the 7th is a Tuesday, so it's as late as it could possibly be. And we thought that the community engagement window would be too tight from the middle of September to November
Yeah.
if we didn't do that until let's set that first meeting in September. Now that we are 14 days from that, and realizing the first day of school is the 23rd,
Yeah.
that might be a little hard for us to turn around in the next 2 weeks.
I don't know why.
I mean, I'll tell you, it's because somebody wants me to rethink the quarantine guidance, but I don't know who that person is. So, I don't know if our recommendation tomorrow night is, what day is Ops Committee in September?
It's on the 7th, which I had looked at, which is the Tuesday after Labor Day, because that's the first Tuesday of the month. So we have another meeting
That's not
before.
with the whole, but that's not with the whole board.
No, that's just the next Ops Committee.
Right. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I'm also just still thinking about the previous conversation we were just having and how we build that plan. Because the thing you also don't want to have happen is like people vote against this because they're, say you want to explore middle schools further, we bake that into the plan. Like, you don't want them to not vote for it because they're against middle schools.
Right.
Right? I mean, like, there's a lot of other things that then would not happen because it becomes a vote about middle schools or becomes comes up or down about preschool, you know, that's a guiding principle for us, early childhood ed. So I'm thinking about that, and then the timeline we need to be able to turn something around. So I wasn't tracking your dates exactly there, but
Well,
what did
I
you
was
say?
trying to build
So
up
we got
that
the 1 in 2
conversation.
weeks that it's going to be too tight, but then you're saying when do we come back?
Well, I'm just saying, if you think that's gonna be too tight, that's what we need to
I,
talk about.
I would rather get to a work session with more preparation. If we have community members come in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to rush it for 2 weeks, that's my deal.
Yeah, I don't think.
Because otherwise, people could get all kinds of weird expectations if we're not really
Sure.
ready.
I also am not sure it's gonna be on everybody's radar, since it's not gonna be on the election until November. And so I'd be worried that in August, I think if we push it out a little closer to, not too close, but we've got some room in there.
So that's a question, do we think we have enough time to go back out and make this presentation or whatever we do around the engagement of the community if we don't come back to the board until the 14th of September? Because we're only 7 weeks from election day at that point.
Yeah, I don't think there's, I think people are too worried about other things to do another community engagement on this.
Oh, okay, you were shaking your head, so I wasn't sure
I
what
was
you
like,
were
no, I don't think we should do that, but I don't think we should try to do that before.
No, I don't think
The work
anyone's gonna
session.
pay attention to us.
No, that's what I'm
Sorry,
saying,
yeah,
that's what I'm
I
saying
missed it.
is, if we don't do the work session till the 14th of September, have we gone back out to the community too late? Or you're saying you think there's enough time between
I think
September
there's enough
14th
time.
and November?
Mhm.
Okay,
I think
that's
there's
what I
enough
wanted,
time.
okay.
That's
Yeah,
what
because I was gonna say we
I-
could also do a committee of the whole, like invite all the board
Yeah,
to
we
an
could do that
operations committee
On the 7th.
on the 7th. Can't do it the 6th because of Labor Day, but we could do that on the 7th. And then you'd have another opportunity on the 14th.
Yeah,
I mean, it's asking everybody to commit another meeting, but it would give you some more time if.
That'd be good from our perspective.
And how many community engagements are you thinking that you want then? Do you only want 2? It gives you the whole month of October to space those
Yeah.
out.
That was my
Communicate
question
that.
is what does this community engagement look like?
It's more of almost like a show and tell.
Yeah.
right?
so we've gotta get out the vote.
Yes,
I
it's
mean,
to,
that's,
it's
it's
to build.
demonstrating, we've done all this great process, here's what it looks like, we've engaged, here's your last chance to help us refine and tweak, but to really encourage people to vote.
Yeah,
And I think the big message here is no new money,
no, real.
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Keeping on the new money. These are the
I didn't hear what you said,
projects
I'm
we're
sorry.
looking at targeting that are left from FMP 1.0. I mean, I do like what you said too, Janet, about I don't want this necessarily some huge cycle of continued community engagement, but if we don't have all the answers, there's no reason we also can't come back after. These funding streams fund other things for us in the district too, and so we don't have to shut the door on, we're never gonna engage you again around some of these
Right.
topics, right? But here's some of the things we're thinking about now based off the feedback. We'll continue to engage the community as we work through this plan. that would keep us out of the, having to have the whole plan necessarily articulated for this one, and then it not becoming a up or down vote about the actual projects themselves.
And, yeah. It's split into different, I think Lisa's onto something when they're talking about how this doesn't mean we're not gonna do anything for athletic facilities, so somehow there's business as usual work, you know, that we're gonna continue to do.
Mhm.
This is more around longer term, more strategic changes in the district to support these top 6 priorities that the community told us about.
And I think that's why it'll be important to pull through that Project A list that Dwayne made.
Yeah.
Because those were
Because
like
some
the
of those
needs
things will
to.
be in
They're-
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they may not look like, but those are the
Yeah.
needs, so we need, I think that's part of the messaging, is
Yeah.
saying,
That's the same thing I was just thinking when she was
Yeah.
saying that, was like, okay, well, some of those things are in there already, so
Yeah.
they can even see some of these things that maybe didn't rate as high, we're still committed to doing.
Yeah.
and I also agree with you, Matt, I think we need to make a decision on Hills. Like,
Yeah.
and that elementary,
Oh,
the
yeah.
board does.
Yeah.
And that's a decision that I think we need to make before November, and we just need to go out, we either need to commit or we need to not. I mean, I think, my personal opinion is we need to commit to it and just say, we're building your new elementary
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
And
Well,
go
I'm on
out and
record in one of the engagements saying it's gonna happen, and it's
Yeah.
gonna
I
happen
mean-
early in the plan, so I mean, I
Yeah.
think
The
we're-
board has already promised that in
Yeah,
the past,
right.
it's a different, but I think we need to reaffirm that commitment as a board and then just say, this is happening.
Mhm.
Be
And-
very clear to the community that there is board support for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that can be, again, one we just put in the meat and potatoes of this that we
Yep.
share right away, and,
Mhm.
yeah. And I like how you framed that too, Jen, and said, but this is about long-term systemic change for these top 6 categories. That's the ongoing work that we need to figure out how that informs our facility planning in the future, so.
Can athletics fit under this top category of social emotional learning?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I had from the outset,
So-
Charlie, that's extracurriculars, that's supporting the whole child. Fine art, I think that goes for the performance music that's down there, the fine arts, the
Yeah.
athletics, I think those are all about positive social emotional learning opportunities we continue for our kids.
And
I
that was
would
kind of my
also-
point, is that we're gonna have to find a way to fit some of those things that seem low priority into some of those upper ones, because those are the folks that we hear from, you know, whether it's music or athletics. So I think that's right.
I would also argue that athletics falls under health and safety.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
another
I mean-
component of it,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Additional classroom space.
Yeah.
It's a different classroom.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so for tomorrow night, I have that we're gonna pull together those 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5 different views that we're gonna share of the overall data. Then we have the language from the ballot, although that's a separate, is that a separate board item, Kim? Okay. So then this idea that we're gonna go and start working on the projects that would fall underneath those, and then do a committee of the whole on the 7th. We'll invite them to a committee of the whole on the 7th, and then come back with the board again on the 14th, and then just schedule a couple of community engagement sessions. The
In
second half
October.
of September, first half of October. Okay. So we can update that timeline as well and attach that, attach a new timeline so people see where it's gonna be, so.
In terms of messaging, community messaging, are we allowed to put together, not mailers, because I don't want to spend money on postage, but mailer-sized info cards? That, for example, we could then, if there, because there's school board elections, so at a candidate forum where people who are interested in
Yeah.
schools going, can we drop a stack of cards that people can pick up so that they can learn more about what's on the ballot and what it does? And
Yeah, if it's information.
it's,
not
yeah, not
advocacy.
advocacy, but
Yeah.
just information, because I think
Yep.
that would also be a good way to reach
Well,
people.
actually, for folks who are campaigning too, farmers markets, even, I mean, just even having this
Yep.
kind of information to strike up a conversation, right?
Man, I hope, I forgot about this. I didn't forget, right? But hopefully all the candidates, hopefully no one's gonna campaign against this.
Right,
Well, you don't know until you know.
I know.
but kind of keep thinking about that point though,
Not
about
new
like,
money, people.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
about,
The Hoover decision is
Sorry.
behind
Right.
us.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was thinking more about the Hills comments that was just made about that we committed to that if you have board members that, or candidates
Yeah.
that would run contrary to that thought.
Yeah.
I don't
Putting
think-
themselves in the bad
I don't think
position.
they can at this
I-
point.
I would just say, keep thinking about that point about like how, because we do want a plan, right, at some point, I mean, you gotta have a plan to point to,
Yeah.
right? And so it can't be like super open-ended either, and so I know I'm kinda arguing both sides of this a little bit as I talk about it, but like, what is the right balance? I think that's the thing, as the committee, that would be helpful for us to know about how much, how specific, how detailed, you know, is the right fit versus how much room, you know, to give to, and what, and maybe we articulate where the room is, like what the room is intended for, and that's how the plan is fit together. Like, these are the specifics, this is what we're committed to, here's where the room is to investigate, you know, what we need to continue to do over here, and that's the right fit. But, you know, if you have more feedback on that, I think before we get to the 7th or in between, that would be helpful for us too.
Was there a graphic that had the portrait of a graduate attributes along with blank spaces for
Oh, yeah.
these top 6?
Yeah.
So can we fill that in for
That's,
tomorrow?
yeah, we'll do that.
And then we can kind of see them all together.
Let's show the next
Yeah.
phase.
And then I
As the
thi-
portrait, as the guiding principles,
Yeah.
and then these 6, yeah.
Mhm.
And the other pieces we think towards November, and, you know, is not only that, kind of that detail pieces, we have to signal if we're not gonna go do some other projects, that at least it looks like not only Hills, but that every area of the district is getting something.
Absolutely,
We've gotta try-
something for everybody.
That's how you turn out the vote, right? So we've gotta figure out a way, no matter how surface or how deep, that whether we use purple, green, and red or something, I don't know, like how we designate that everybody in every area, corner of the district is getting something somehow.
Well, and we
That
employed a
everyone's-
lot of those tactics with FMP 1.0 when we went out for the bond. And so I think we could do a lot of those, use a lot of those same strategies to show how it does cover the entire district. So we can pull out some of that, the work that we did for the bond, and see how it could be used in this similar. That was very project specific though. You know, we had
Every
a,
building.
yeah, we had a project page for each building to show exactly how it impacted that school. And even put a big, you know, poster board at the front of each school. I don't know
Yeah.
if we want to get that specific
I
or.
think that's too specific.
Right.
But maybe,
Hello.
maybe the in-between is elementary, junior high, or some sort of split like that, or,
By level, by
Yeah.
region, by feeder,
yeah.
or region and feeder be the same.
Um,
You said the level.
But I think going back to that ABC project list too,
Yeah.
will
I
be
do too.
important then to pull the, and frame it as examples.
Sure.
But those are still good, like, looking at social emotional learning as our #1 community feedback, here are examples of projects that address the social emotional
Yeah.
learning needs of our students.
Okay.
But at the same, not necessarily for sure, but this is what we're talking about for the community feedback sessions. And then I also think what's gonna be important for those community feedback sessions is to do a deeper dive in
Into
defining
what it means.
what these terms
Yeah.
mean. And having that available for people to look
Mhm.
at and digest so that they can say,
that's a good
okay,
point.
here's 5 sentences on what social emotional learning means. Now I understand
Yeah,
what the concept
that's a
is.
great point, because some of these terms we use so much
Mhm.
all the time and we just know, so, yeah,
Yeah, we
that's a
can
good
color
point.
code that ABC list.
Yeah.
Then the only other thing's gonna be time, like who gets to go first, who gets to go last, where does all that, we'll have to talk about that too.
The defining terms is a good point as well. Okay.
Yeah. But just the 6, I mean, if we define
Right,
everything,
right.
then it's too much, and then
Right.
people don't read
All
it.
right, yeah.
All right. KP, how you feeling? I think I have enough to go on for tomorrow night.
Yeah, no, yeah, we can compare our lists and see if they align.
So I wonder, so,
Better bring a snack tomorrow night.
I know, right? We didn't really talk about this, but, and a board member could ask it, they might not, but since we do have a few more minutes before our hard stop, what if a board member says, can we substitute one of the other ones? As a board, we don't think STEM or STEAM should be a guiding principle. We think that it's covered by the other ones. Are we gonna let the board have an open discussion of whether or not they want to hop something, or are we gonna say, you know, that was the board's chance with the guiding principles, this is the community feedback? I don't know if that's gonna come up, I just wonder if that might be something.
I mean, without sounding too crass, like, it's community feedback, it's not binding the board. So I think the board retains the right to do whatever the
I
board
agree.
wants to do.
Okay,
No,
I mean, if someone wants to challenge, or we need to have the conversation, I think. and
Yeah.
listen and as a group decide whether we wanna change the priorities or not.
And the more likely result is you'll include something else.
Yeah,
Instead of
But
removing
I
something,
think what'll be
right?
compelling
Yeah.
though is the
Yeah.
presentation of the various
Mhm.
constituents, cause it's very aligned.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I mean, someone's gonna have to have a really strong point of view that something down here is not, should be higher priority. Anyway, I just think,
I just think it's
Yeah.
important, like, so we didn't, just kind of, but I agree. I think if the board wants to say, no, we appreciate the feedback, here's what we're gonna go with, absolutely, that's the board's prerogative. But I just felt like I should bring it up here, rather us get to the board table and, you know, then we can think, oh, yeah, sure, let's have that discussion.
Well, I could see that, somebody trying to do that, but wanting to combine career and technical
Well-
education with workplace learning, or
So
that.
that's a good point.
Point.
Based on where we were with the guiding principles, it's probably not replacement, it's probably,
it's
is there a way to capture
back
more?
to the definition.
Is there a way to,
Sentences.
yes,
Yeah.
is there a way to capture more of these by
Yeah.
combining them?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I'll bring a snack and a sleeping bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a long meeting tomorrow. Yes.
Maybe we'll have great alignment on every topic. Exactly. Okay, so,
Always the optimist.
yeah, somebody's gotta be.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I think that these have been well-received, for having to do it virtually during the summer. You know, a couple times we heard, well, there's not as many people as last time. Well, yeah, and the sequel is never as good as the original. But I think the process was great in this one, so I don't really buy into that, but I think between it being the summer, between it being virtual and between us doing it a different way, I'm pleased with it. And I think the feedback we got was very positive.
The ask is smaller also.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that when the ask is smaller, there are some members that are just okay with it, of the community, that are just like, that's okay.
Well, and again, I think we have to go back to, we had over 700 people
Yeah.
provide
Yeah,
responses.
that's what I'm thinking too.
And
Emphasize
more
the
than that,
total.
participate, right?
Yeah.
And so this idea of, well, I went to a community session, there were only 40 people there. Right, but you know what, there were 730 people that participated in different ways than you
Yeah.
participated, and that's something we didn't have available last time.
Yeah, you look at the
We can only
volume of
go
people, yeah,
To
exactly.
this one thing, so I think there's a lot of positives for us to also talk about when we can share this information.
And I know there'd be naysayers to this, but I think we should also recognize you build a lot of trust in the first 8.5 years of this plan about how it was done, right? I mean, I do think that was a testament to that, about it was on time, it was under budget, projects happened like we said they would happen. So I think that probably informs some of the thinking too in this regard.
All right, well, then the only other thing on the agenda was next meeting, and it sounds like September 7th, we're gonna invite the entire board. So I think we can adjourn, dare I say?
Yeah.